Alright, we have interaction with the checkpoints now, but we still don't have any game logic. We don't have a game here. We can do cool things, we can fly around, we can hit the checkpoints, and they'll light up. But this is more of just a toy right now. There's no game logic associated with it. So the point is to hit these checkpoints, and a time is going to show up on when we hit these checkpoints right here. And I'm going to make the time show up first so we can get that functionality, and then I'm going to show you how we can make sure that we hit them in order. So let's start that process. If you look at the checkpoint prefab here, there is a feedback node. If I go into the scene, you'll be able to see this a little bit easier. I'll click on this one right here. If I drop this down, this thing has multiple pieces to it that has children to it. This is the entire object. Its feedback node is this little thing right here. It has text that we can use, but it also has something called a timestamp. And I have this turned off right here. And if I turn it back on, you can see right here, this is the game object it's associated with, and it has a text mesh component to it. If I turn this back on, you can see that a little time thing pops up there. And that little time thing is what I want to show my time when I hit the trigger. But I'm going to turn that back off. And because I want it off to begin with, and then I'll turn it on when I actually hit this thing. But it also has to know the time that I hit it, and I want to keep that time for the game in a certain place. So let's get it just showing first, and after we get it showing, we'll set up the timer in our game main to feed the information to it when we want to use it. So I don't have to do this in all of these things. I'm going to actually do it in the prefab again, in the checkpoint prefab where we were before. I'm going to, on trigger enter, I'm going to do this also. I'm actually going to do it before I do this, so I'm going to disconnect this, bring that over here. And what do I need from this? Well, I have my checkpoint selected here, and it knows that it has a little timestamp thing here that's turned off in the prefab. Turned off right there. That checkbox means it's turned off. So I need to turn that on. So I need a reference to it. And the reference to it, this is a game object that's a child of this. So I need a game object to hold this thing. I'm going to make a game object variable. Search for game object. This is the one I want. And I'm going to call this text object. Time object. Time object. Might be a bit better. And you see it has nothing in it. It's not filled in yet. I need to fill it in, and what I'm going to fill it in is my object of my timestamp here. I'm going to take the timestamp object, and remember, this is the prefab. So it's going to, every instance of the one I have in here is going to react to this and grab its own timestamp and fill it into this variable here. And basically all I have to do is on trigger enter. I'm going to add one of these to the scene. I'm going to do this back and forth multiple ways so you get used to seeing how to do it. Add it to the scene. And what I need to do with this, since it's set inactive, I'm going to go just type in active. And there's set active right here. I can set active. And what I want to do is pull this in. And the value, right now it's set to false. Click this button and it's going to say set active true. So it's basically going to take this timestamp and set that check mark to true when I do that. And if I hook that back up, it should go green. And I should see my timestamp come up, which I do right there. There's no value in it yet because I'm not feeding it the correct time values for it. All of these should work because they're all instances of that. And so let's figure out how to get the correct values in there. And I don't want to have to do that every time. I mean, I could do it every time, but it's just for the purposes of holding all the information in one place for the game. I need to hold that in a certain place. And where I'm going to hold that is in the game main. So my game main right here, it is also a prefab that I can do this, but I'm going to show you how to apply to a prefab. If you choose to do something not on the prefab or something in the scene, we can apply that and it will make the one down here match what's going with it. So I'll show you that functionality. I'm going to add a component to the one that's in the scene. Virtual hammer, diagram behavior. I have my editor. And I can, in this space, I need to start keeping track of some time. And I'm going to make ints for this time. So I'm going to make an int called hours. I'm going to make a couple ints here. 3 more. Int minutes. Int seconds. And int milliseconds. I'm going to create all of those. So I have my hours, milliseconds, minutes, seconds, all the things I need. And I need to fill these in. And this kind of can become a messy process of doing this. And I'll probably do this in another video because it's going to take a little while. I just want to get the game main started up here and do a simple version of this so that I can show you what this is and how to access them. And then in the next video, we'll make a function that actually gets the real version of these working, which is a little complicated, but you just need to do the math on how to get those things correct. So I'm going to just add in values for these right now. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And these obviously are not going to be the right time, but I'm going to show you how to access them in the checkpoint so that we can do this. Now, if I look at game main here, you can see this game main, the prefab, which this is an instance of, it doesn't have a diagram component on it, and it doesn't even have a graph, but this one in here does. I usually want my prefabs to become, unless I'm making a very specific change in one of these things, I want my prefabs to replicate what these are, because the instances should be what the prefabs are. So I can hit this button right here, apply. And if I hit apply to this instance, if I go down and click on the game main now, you'll see that it now has a diagram behavior with all the variables I put in it. And that's going to, you're going to want to be able to do that. If you messed up on one of these instances, like if I made some changes in here and added some stuff and it started to get messy or whatever, I could just hit revert on this and it will revert it back to whatever the prefab had saved. So if I do it in the prefab, it will propagate to all of these automatically. If I make the changes in one of the instances in here, I have to hit apply to make it go to the prefab. And if I want to make the instance go back to what the prefab was, I can just hit revert. And it will allow me to do that. So I have some variables in here in my game main, and I want my checkpoint to understand these variables. And this is a pretty big concept that people get confused with when using scripting, is how to communicate between my different scripts here. So we've tried to simplify that using diagram. What I want in here is I want to tell my text object that I just set active, I want to tell my text object, you're going to read some values from game main. How do we do that? Well, I need to get the text object, not the text object game object, but the timestamp text timestamp object here has a component on it called text mesh. And this is the thing that actually reads the time. I need this component and I need to tell its text to be something else. So I'm going to make a text mesh variable because this component I need to talk to right here, just like when I talk to the animator, I need to talk to this component's text mesh. I want to talk to it, text mesh. And I'm going to call this time text mesh and create it. And since this is a text mesh variable, if I just drag this game object onto it, it knows to take the correct text mesh type. If it has one on there, it'll find it and put it in there. And I need to set this thing's text right now, but I need the correct time to do it. I don't want to delete this whole thing. I'm just going to disconnect it and move it over more. So as soon as I set it active, now I want to set its text. And I don't have the correct text. I just have stuff that I put in here. We'll get the correct time in a different video, as I mentioned. But let's set this text mesh here. So to do that, we need to access the game main. To understand the variables that this game main has, we're going to need to get the behavior off of this game main. All of these are components. This transform is a component. We got the transform before when we did the camera. This glyph behavior script here, this is just a script. We need access to this to understand what variables do we have in here. And to do that, I want to get the type I want is a glyph behavior. And I'm going to call this main behavior. So this wants a glyph behavior, and what I'm going to do, just so I have access to it, is just so I have access to the variables, I'm going to take the game main prefab and I'm going to fill it in here. If it wasn't a prefab and I needed the variables off it, I could grab it from the scene. But these ones can change pretty independently. So you usually, if you want to get something off it, make a prefab of that object and send the prefab in, because it's going to stay more consistent. And if I do that, and I put this variable out here, add to graph, when I drag off of this behavior variable, it's not going to show all the things that I could do off of like this. It's going to show specifically just the variables that contains. So if I wanted minutes, I could get the minutes off of this. If I wanted seconds, I could get the seconds off of this. And if I wanted milliseconds, I could get that off of this. And that all comes from the variables that this holds. So I can get these values. Now, I'm getting these from the prefab. And the prefab is not the one that actually changes. The one that changes is in here. So I have to go find the version of this that is actually changing and fill in this variable. I bring in the prefab just so I can see the types of variables in here during editor time. But during runtime, when I actually hit play, I need to find the real version of this. So I'm going to do that in start. On my checkpoint. On start, I want to go look for this thing called game main that's in my scene here. So let's try to find game object find name. I just typed in find. Game object find name. That's great. And the name of the object I want is game main, spelled exactly like that. Game main. I'll hook that up. Now this is going to look through the entire scene and find something called game main spelled like that. And it's going to spit out the game object for that. So I need to catch that also in a variable so I can do things with it. So I'm going to make a variable. And it spits out a game object. Game objects are orange. And I'm going to call this main game object. Because I need to get the game object to get access to its components, and the component I want is the behavior. Clicking back on the prefab for that, come off this, I want to set main game object, and I'm setting that. And what I need to do is I need to get the component off of this dynamically at runtime. So I'm going to drag off of this and type get component off of the game object. And then I have to tell it what component I'm looking for. Well, if I look on the game main, it only has two components on it. It has a transform and it has a glyph behavior, a diagram glyph behavior script. So the one I want is this diagram glyph behavior script because it holds all the variables in it. Click back on my checkpoint, drop this down and type in glyph, and it's right there, glyph behavior. Now, this variable that I made, the game main behavior, because I drugged this in editor time just so I could see the variables, I need to assign this variable, main behavior, to that. And now, instead of taking this game main, which I'm just using to find variables so I can continue scripting, it's going to say, give me the real version. Find in here and give me the real version that's updating on that one. And once I have that, I can start using it in my on-trigger enter. These will dynamically get filled into the correct variables that's holding that. And now I want to tell this text mesh right here, my text mesh, I'm going to need to set its text. But I need to do that with a string. So to create a string, these are numbers. Ints are numbers, and a string is actually text, and I need to convert these to text. So I'm going to drag off of this and type toString, and I can use a couple of these. I'm going to use this conversion one, toString, and that says this int that is a number, I'm going to make you the word of whatever that is. But I need to format it correctly, because if I look at the scene here, and I grab one of these checkpoints, if I look at its timestamp, you can see that its timestamp is number, colon, number, period, number. So I need to set it to be like that in my checkpoint. And to do that, I'm just going to add some words together. Add words and letters and symbols together so that I could get that. So this minutes, this was the first number there. And after that, I'm just going to type in plus. And you can see operator add string. And I want to add a colon. So I'm just adding a colon to that. Then after the colon came the seconds. So I'm going to do this to string. Grab this first one here, and I'm going to come off this and go plus, add string. And the string I want to add after the colon are the seconds. Now I have to add a new string here, plus, add string. After the seconds came a period. And I have to do plus, add string. And then after the period came the milliseconds, toString. And this, after all of this, this is the final string that I want that has the minutes, colon, added the seconds, period, added the milliseconds. The end's going to come out here. And that is what I want to set this text to. So text mesh, type in text, and under text mesh I want to find set text, and it has a execute, so I have to set the logic to it. These are just getting values. They don't have execute nodes. They're just getting values, and I'm going to take that and put it there, and this should say 2, 3, 4, because I didn't do the hours. If we look at the variables we put here, it did 1, 2, 3, 4, but I only used the minutes here. And this should say the text mesh, on trigger enter, it should turn the text mesh on, get the game main behavior, find what its variables are for the minutes, seconds, and milliseconds, concatenate and add all those together to set the text mesh with a value I want, and then it's going to turn it green again here, which we did before. So hopefully this works. 3, 4, 2. must have put the wrong values in somewhere or did something wrong. And we can go look at that again. But that is now taking the values from that. And I think if I go back into game main, and I'm going to do it in the prefab now, and open this, hours milliseconds was 2. So this should be 4 because it does it by, and minutes should be 2, and seconds should be 3. Now it should be minutes, seconds, milliseconds, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. And so that's how we get the time to show up on trigger enter with this. But now we need to tell game main to start calculating the correct time for that since the game started. And we're going to do that in the next video. So thank you.